Getting beat up by spreadsheets in your brewery? Don't let those dumb pivot tables bully you around. Get rid of the spreadsheets and the other clunky brewery software and get Ollie, the smart and affordable way to manage your brewery. Learn more at getollie.com.
Well, it looks like it's just a little past 4 o'clock Eastern time, so we'll begin our session, the Craft Beer Professional Community Fall Virtual Conference. This is an educational session, so I'm glad to be able to participate in this with our panelist group. So this is a panel discussion, the role of oxygen in brewing, a double-edged sword. So this session will explore the science and practical outcomes of using pure oxygen in the brewing fermentation compared with compressed air. By focusing on microbial activities and oxygen purity, the session will highlight why pure oxygen is superior choice to fermentation. So I'd like to introduce the people on our session. Today we have Gary Fogg from Four Peaks Brewing, who's going to talk about how that brewery used oxygen in its brewing process to better production for their brewing. And then we have John Longuil from Novair, USA, and John has been helping Four Peaks with their oxygen generating equipment. So he has a lot of in-depth knowledge of how they're using oxygen generators to generate the oxygen for their process. So I thought I'd first maybe Gary just have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Four Peaks.
All right, thanks, Derek. My name is Gary Fogg. I'm the maintenance manager here at Four Peaks Brewing. I've been in the craft beer with Four Peaks for about 10 years now. There's where the pub and everything started, probably about 30 years ago with Four Peaks Brewing. Ever since I've worked here, on the oxygen side, Four Peaks has always used oxygen bottles, and it's just been an ongoing increase in price year after year that we're just trying to overcome, and that's where we fell into oxygen generators.
That's excellent. John, maybe a little bit of background on your side?
Yeah, John Longuil. I'm the CEO of Novair USA, and I met Gary about a year and a half ago through our local rep out west, Brian Jarvis, and Gary came to us with a unique need of wanting to replace his bottled oxygen because the costs were getting driven up so much. And so as a company, Novair USA represents both oxygen generators and nitrogen generators. And we worked with Gary and his team to not only find a solution that met the volume that they were using, but we also had to overcome some unique challenges with balancing out line pressures and different things to make sure that the injection was getting put in correctly to the ratios that he wanted it, and we did some a little bit of technical assistance and some custom engineering to help him out with that process. So it's been a great partnership so far, and we've been learning a lot from Four Peaks and the team there, and look forward to speaking with Gary some more today about that experience and their experiences with using oxygen in their brewing process over compressed air.
That is excellent. Before we go any further, I have one question for Gary. Is really Four Peaks Brewery haunted?
If you believe in that stuff. And according to ghost hunters.
I hear that you have tours of the brewery and the historic building on 8th Avenue, which you see here back in the early 1900s or late 1800s. There are tools that go missing. There is an 8-foot man that lurks among the barrels of beer. Tragedy is struck by people dying inside, and also a train wreck, an actual train wreck right outside the building's walls. And so I thought, it's getting close to Halloween here, and so any insight into that? Have you seen any ghosts, Gary? I guess is what we're asking.
I have not, but other people claim they have. And I know we are running our haunted brewery tours right now at the facility. So it's a pretty good little tour, little history about the place, and walk around with peers and get scared of stuff in the dark.
Well, that's very cool.
I learned something new last time I was out to visit Gary, that the original part of that creamery building was used years ago in the 90s for the Gin Blossoms recording studio, and there's a room in there with all sorts of signatures and memorabilia that they've saved. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique and has a lot of character to the old building.
Excellent. Well, that is a very cool thing to know. Maybe just one step back on some background of Four Peaks. This location here, you have the brew pub in one location on 8th Avenue or 8th Street, and then you have this one on Wilson, which is this your main production facility?
Yeah, Wilson Street is our main production facility. Pretty much, I'd say 90% of the beer now comes out of Wilson for Arizona, and a lot of the brew pub now is just for one-off small brands and supporting the pub on that 40-barrel system. Wilson has a 60-barrel system with 240-barrel fermentation tanks.
So what size of brewery is it? So our audience knows, a craft brewery, many craft breweries are quite small.
Yeah, so this year we're going to be probably pushing close to 80,000 barrels out of this facility. I would say probably max, if we run 24/7 with production, we're probably close to 100,000 barrels is probably where we can max out at this site. So with our current staffing, we're going to hit probably 80,000 this year.
And Gary, refresh my memory, how many barrels you were doing in the other facility before you moved on to this one at peak?
Yeah, so I think peak time at Four Peaks on the 8th Street location, which is a 40-barrel system, I think they got to max to about 42,000 barrels.
Okay.
Which is really impressive when you see the layout and how tight things were and running trucks. I just don't know. That was definitely before my time here at Four Peaks, but it's definitely really impressive on how much they got out of that small facility.
Interesting. Very good. Thank you. I thought I'd bring up this photo here of the oxygen generator, which replaced your oxygen cylinders that you used to have delivered every week. Maybe just any background on how many cylinders were being purchased and what their costs were, and kind of leads into the question of, what problem were you solving here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were running aviation gas, which is 99.99% pure. And we knock out with 4 turns out of our 60-barrel to fill a 240. We knock out with oxygen on all 4 turns to oxygenate yeast. And I think we were getting about between 4 to 5 tanks per bottle. The bottles every year seem to have increased cost, and I want to say that we were close to, I think, $300 to $400 a bottle is what it's gotten to now. Also, along with rental costs with that as well, just for holding the bottles on hand. So went along, started researching oxygen generators is when I ran into Novair, and we created that partnership. We were looking for something to replace to have good quality oxygen, something that we knew that had very consistent and just not a big variable from what we were using before, and wanted to see a direct replacement without any impact of beer fermentation or any lags or anything like that. So that's kind of where we were at.
Gary, you mentioned too, when we were talking a little bit about why you were using aviation, and if memory served me correct, why you were using aviation oxygen. Was it for the dryness, or what was the the reason over
I
a standard medical or just a 93% standard grade?
I think it's just more for, you just know that you have clean, pure oxygen, I think is what it came down to. It's kind of just been always the Four Peaks standard. And I mean, if it's working, don't go and try and fix it. So.
And you've been able to maintain that quality of the air with the generator process?
Yeah, and the generator, like I said, we spot check it. Summer months we might lose 1 or 2%. Then into winter, just because our ambient temperature gets so hot, it just seems to have a little bit of drift. But we're still at 97%, and now with this cooler temperature coming around in October, I think I'd seen 97 and had a 98 doing spot checks on it last week with our preventative maintenance.
Okay.
There was some conversation about humidity, or not humidity, but water in different grades of oxygen. And I understand the aviation oxygen didn't have any water in it, or very little humidity, I guess maybe they call it. Can you expand on that?
I just know it as being the driest, like you said, just less moisture in there, in that oxygen.
Yeah, and compare that to when you were not using oxygen before, like with compressed air. What was the reason for going from compressed air, or if people are using compressed air, what they might be seeing compared to going with either bottled oxygen or generated oxygen?
Yeah, with compressed air, obviously, our atmosphere, we only have 20% of our atmosphere is oxygen. The other one is we run big compressors on site that we were tapping into when we have had oxygen shortages, and we've ran compressors before. And with that, you have to obviously flow a lot more rate. Our injection point isn't very long. We have a smaller nozzle that's injecting in line to the header. And then we have to run, sterile filters in line with that, which require, they do get pricey. They're expensive. You got to autoclave them. You have, limited time. And some of those filters on an 1.5-inch gasket can be $800 a piece. So it was kind of just removing those costs. We don't know if it was due to that, but we had a few tanks that kind of, when we were running compressed air, they kind of lagged during fermentation process. This summer, since we switched over to oxygen generator, I don't think we had one of them hiccup, but I think it was an yeast issue. But other than that, we didn't have any tanks, lag in fermentation. All our ales are finishing out. It's under 13, 14 days is what we can finish a beer out.
Well, maybe that's a good place to ask this question. We have, of course, our audience has brewmasters in it and all sorts of different people from the brewery industry. But maybe just a very simple question: why is oxygen essential to the brewery process for fermentation, and at what point are you injecting it in? Is it just after the wort? Yeah.
So right behind the oxygen generator, there's a heat exchanger there. Depending on what beer recipe style, we'll just knock out for that yeast health. So right after knockout, get it down to correct temperature, and then we have an inline injection that we inject yeast at, and the oxygen's right before that. We would do, to make sure we have the right amount of flow rate, because we have a flow meter that's on the oxygen generator. We're flowing anywhere from, I'd say 10 to 13 liters a minute. And then we look for wort aeration between 8. We want to be under 10 ppm is right about there, but 8 to 10 seems to be what works well with fermentation. Like I said, I'm the brewmaster, I'm the maintenance manager, so I know where the numbers need to be. I can't go into the science as much, but that's kind of where we've talked about it.
Absolutely. And maybe a little bit on how oxygen influences the yeast growth and cell count. I know, yeah.
I mean, like I said, I don't want to really speak on that since that's not my area of expertise. But like I said, we were doing it before with oxygen bottles, looking for that same ppm. with wort aeration. And that's kind of what we wanted to put in place, was an oxygen generator that had a good ROI, had good cost savings, and that was doing the exact same thing that oxygen bottles were doing. And a big thing too is safety, having people not haul oxygen bottles around, not having to truck them back and forth through the warehouse. I mean, they're heavy, they're cumbersome. Definitely just makes it easier.
I think it's important to mention too, Gary, when we've been out to visit and speak with your brewmasters and stuff, you have a pretty advanced lab there doing cultures and tracking your data. So you know, when we look at smaller accounts that may be sort of trialing and erroring and experimenting a little bit, you guys track your data pretty consistently, and can't really have any variation in your data, so it's important.
Yep. Yeah, and like I said, and throughout this, since we've been on this oxygen generator, we've had good cell counts, good beer finishing out quickly, and like I said, no real hiccups. So that's the important thing. And people are drinking our beer, so it's even better. I'm not going to go argue with consumers.
Just maybe coming back to the compressed air versus pure CO2. I know in the dispense side of the business, we've had situations where the bars use compressed air to push the beer from the keg on up to the bar top in long draw systems. And their compressors, we've had identified one area where the compressor every Tuesday morning was the beer for Tuesday night always tasted off, and they could not figure out why this beer in this bar tasted off. And what they found out was every Tuesday morning there was a truck that came by and sat outside for 20 minutes delivering, and it was pumping diesel exhaust around the compressor, and that compressor was pushing that contaminated air into the beer kegs. So that's one example of just problematic issues with having compressed air in a manufacturing facility where you can't always guarantee to have purity just because of the environment. Gary, was your compressor inside, or where was it located? Any problems like that?
Yeah, it's in the far back of the building. We do have some pretty good like filtration and water separators and things like that we pre-filter before anything you would get to there. But yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, for compressed air on finished beer is probably that's probably one of the worst things. I mean, you're going to oxidize the beer right away, and you're going to just change profile and can be all papery and not taste great just right off the bat. And I mean, that's kind of what we're down to is like, my background is like a machinist by trade. And if you start with something like you're doing all the right steps, I'm trying to keep it as close to perfect as possible. And if you start out with a good process, then like if you have little hiccups on the way, you don't get a big swing because you're not out of spec that far. So I think that's kind of really important, is having a single variable that's constant, consistent, things like that. I mean, with compressed air, especially with our temperature in Arizona, like sometimes inside our plant, we're over 100 degrees, and compressors are taking that air, compressing it, and we'll see discharge temps of our compressor of north of 200 degrees. So with that, I mean, you're going to now cool down your beer, cool down the wort. You're doing the injection, and then you're inject 200 degree or 180 degree air, oxygenating in there. Where this is a lot softer, a lot cooler temperatures out of the compressor. So out of the oxygen generator, I should say. So definitely less variable there. And I mean, I think that's always the goal, is having very consistent numbers. You can make it a lot more repeatable.
And Derek, on the retail side, when we toured over there, although it's not one of our brands, Four Peaks does have a nitrogen generation system pushing their retail side, mixing with CO2. So that was very promising to see that they maintain that air consistency when they push in their retail side.
The continuing with the topic of compressed air. So compressed air, you have nitrogen, argon, water vapor, oil, All those things could be pushed into the brewing process. Certainly, that would be a concern, I would think, versus going with oxygen tanks or a generation system. Can you speak a little more about that? Did you have any of those problems?
I mean, like I said, we've never, I don't think we've ever gone down to tracking just those, other gases. I know at like some of our big breweries and things like that we're associated with, they just run compressed air, but they're where they oxygenate. It's a giant stripping column. So it's, 10 feet tall that you get a lot more contact time. They don't seem to have a problem. They're able to do it, but I don't know. I wouldn't know the effect of those other things. I mean, obviously moisture and oil aren't good things, but there are ways to separate those out just with filtration. But you definitely need something filtered. You gotta get some of those unwanted things out of your compressed air.
Gary, how about the ROI too? We've talked a little bit about the size of a brewery that makes sense to make the capital investment for this type of equipment. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I won't speak on, I don't know what their generators are selling for or anything like that. But for us, we were doing, I believe we were at about 30 turns through the brew house a week now. So, I mean, we're about 7 bottles that we were going through, and at $300-400 a bottle. I mean, you guys can do kind of the math. I think we had it's right about 3-month ROI, 3 to 4 month ROI we had on this generator.
Okay.
It was pretty much paid for through our trial, so it was pretty nice.
Yes, you did save some money there. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I mean, with the few little things that we struggled through, I mean, obviously there was things where we were losing pressure, and I added check valves. We added inline. You can see kind of in the photo, there's that little white disc, and that's just I want to say it's 0.02 micron filter that's rated at 75. We had to overcome 50 psi, which was our header pressure, and then I have a little inline plastic check valve, and then that whole hose can actually come off, and everything can be autoclaved. So we can put it, get it to the lab, have it autoclaved, sterilized, they bag it, and then we can take it out and put a new one on. So we rotate them out every time they've been contaminated or touch beer, but it's usually once a week. We'll just autoclave them and then put a new one in.
And then you have behind there too. We have a picture of it somewhere, but there's a sight glass with a stone and just a regular nipple injection.
Yep. That's it's pretty simple. So it's very similar to, other craft breweries that I've been to.
Yeah.
And is there different ways to inject oxygen into the wort? Different types of injection systems, or what type are you using?
I think there are different stones and nozzles and things like that, but we just have, it's pretty much like a carb stone that injects it in line.
Okay. When you went to switch over from cylinder gas to this in-house generation of gas of O2, can you talk about, did you have any problems doing that? How long it took? The hiccups along the way?
I would say the biggest thing was, I think when we first tried a unit, it didn't have a booster pump on it. So we kind of needed, depending on where we're at in our line, because we have 24 240 fermentation vessels. So our run can be very different. It could be 20 feet to the first tank, or it can be 120 feet to the last tank. So we have different header pressure, just trying to push that much volume in that amount of time. So with that, we kind of established like a baseline of what pressure's on the header. It was about, like, I'd say we did this where we made a loop with the CIP arm, put a pressure gauge on it. I ran the the knockout pump at full speed at 100%, so 60 hertz. And I had 50 PSI header pressure. So that was kind of my baseline that I knew I needed to put a regulator on it. And we knew the tank pressure always had to stay above 50 PSI. So you wouldn't get anything to come back and come in contact with that nozzle. So we set the regulator at 60. The generator pumps the bulk tank underneath up to, I believe we're at 95 PSI. And then 45 minutes to about an hour, it will cycle down to about that 55, 60 PSI. And then we're usually done with knockout. It recovers over while we're in the brewing process, and then ready for the next knockout.
Have you ever ran out of gas or oxygen with the system?
I think nights they had. One time we had something, a line came off or a vent inside. I can't remember exactly what it was. But as you see, I mean, we kind of have a double redundance. Behind the oxygen generator, we still keep one bottle on hand. And then usually that's enough, like if something, catastrophic or something like that. I mean, don't hope for that stuff. But if it does happen, the guys can very quickly switch the hose over. It's already set up with a regulator on it. And then they can at least finish the beer and make sure it has the right amount of oxygen.
This you may be able to answer this or possibly not, but using oxygen, how has that affected the timing and your production of beer? Has it shortened that production window for getting the yeast to start growing, or has it maybe a little bit of comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, we like I said, going into this, it was definitely a cost project that we were focused on. But with that, we literally wanted to see no change in going from, rented bottles of oxygen to an oxygen generator. And that's what we saw, was just no change in this. We're still able to finish beers out in 2 weeks on our ales, which was the main goal going into this.
Well, that's excellent. John, any other questions on your side that you can come up with? I've kind of gone through my major list of questions here.
No, I think other interesting points about Four Peaks. You guys are part of the Anheuser-Busch family through a larger merger or acquisition. Any things that you guys share amongst breweries? Is there technology share or discussion share? Or
yeah, and I've been working. We've been some of our other craft sites have shown interest in it, just because they're in the same boat of everybody wants to make more money and help the bottom line every year. So there's been discussions internally with that. I know I've talked with some of the other breweries that have some interest, and at our facility too, we cross brew some of the other brands like Elysian. So not only have we seen positives on our beer, but we've also seen other beers that are spice beers and things with the same process and same generator with good fermentation and great tasting beer.
I think that's it for us. I can give a great recommendation for the pumpkin ale. It's excellent. Had it last time I was there.
Yeah, the pumpkin porter definitely tasting good this year.
Yes.
Maybe one other question. The timing of oxygen in the brewing process, is that something we can talk about? How is it, like, is it critical that it goes in at a certain time?
Yeah, I mean,
it's
absolutely
short in that
critical,
length.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just right when you're coming out of first initial part of yeast health is important for oxygen. You don't want it obviously injected late because you can oxidize beer that way. Because I mean, after fermentation, I mean, we usually cap our tanks before we crash the tanks to 0 or 32 degrees. And at that point, we cap them. We put barbecue valves on them, and we keep them at about 5 psi in the tanks to make sure we don't get any oxygen or anything gets introduced back into that to have any oxygen contact.
One thing Derek, one thing when you were asking about other types of injectors and things too, Gary's looking at putting a smaller setup later in the year so we can do some testing with nanobubble injectors, which will allow a smaller, much smaller micro bubble that should stay in suspension longer and allow the yeast to have more available oxygen, because with a larger bubble tends to float to the top, the yeast tends to settle to the bottom. When it consumes all the oxygen that's around it, a lot of that oxygen floats and goes to waste. So there's data out there with these micro and nano bubbles. Not that you're trying to increase the percentage of oxygen or over oxygenate, but make more available at the level that the yeast is floating at in the mixture. So something that we'll look forward to having the Four Peaks lab test and give us some good data on that as we move forward.
Fascinating stuff. Gary, anything else you'd like to add on the whole process, your experience with switching over?
No, I mean, it's been a real positive experience for us. Like I said, brewers aren't complaining, and no news is good news in my book.
Well, that's excellent. And our attendees today can certainly email any questions, and we'll get some answers back to you. So that will round out our discussion today. And Gary and John, I very, very much appreciate you joining us for this session. And thanks, I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good one. Cheers.